Hello guys, welcome back. I'm continuing the reading from There's Something You Should Know About Leroy. So I left off in the middle of chapter 4. So I'm just going to pick up from that last page I read, chapter 4. Okay, still have Zande and Kimura with me. As always, my little pets. They're my little pets. So I'm going to continue reading from chapter 4. Like any other Saturday, the beach was crowded. People came from as far away as Kingston and even further afield to wash away the stress of the work week that had just passed and gear up for the one that was approaching. Some only wanted to soak up some sun. They lay on blankets or benches, suntan oil oozing from their pores, sunglasses firmly fixed over their closed eyes. Perhaps a straw hat to complete the tourist effect. Their children played about with balls or shovels, piling sand on top of each other, going for horseback rides. Others bobbed near the water's edge on old car tires or rubber floats. Others still wandered further at sea, out towards the deep, where they were warned not to go. Many had drowned along this stretch of beach. The coast was rocky and unpredictable, at times dipping without warning over a steep underwater crag. The current often came in powerful and unrelenting. You had to know what you were doing or you'd be quickly carried under. Greg did a triple backflip. This was usually done to impress Prudence, whom he was desperately in love with. She had been impressed the first time he had done it, about 3 years ago. "Look, Prue, I can do this with my eyes closed," he said, almost crashing into a horse who was being led up and down the shoreline with 3 small children on his back. Cheyenne laughed. "He's a clown," Prudence said, shaking her head. "Come into the water, Cheyenne, don't play shy." Prudence chuckled on the words Cheyenne and shy. "Don't be shy, Cheyenne," she said again. Leroy glanced over at Cheyenne. Unlike the other girls who wore 2-piece bikinis, Cheyenne wore a t-shirt with bra underneath and a pair of shorts that almost went to her knees. "That name is gonna stuck," teased Leroy. "We're gonna call you Shy Cheyenne. Come into the water, Shy. Can you swim?" "A little, long as the water don't pass my ankles," she said. Cheyenne ventured out a little, mainly splashing her feet in the water and scooping up handfuls of sand, letting the seawater drip through her fingers and leaving sand and seashells behind. Then she dumped that and picked up another handful. Though so much of her skin was covered, it was easy to see that she had perfectly even olive skin tone. She was what Jamaicans referred to as mixed, her father of Indian descent, her mother claiming Irish heritage. She had long curly hair that fell to the middle of her back. Today, she had it all in one big plait that sometimes rolled over in front and rested on her breasts. She had huge breasts and a very curvaceous figure in spite of her slender build. "Come out into the water, Shy," ordered Leroy jokingly. "You can't come to the beach and stay on the sand." Primrose grabbed her and tried to pull her into the water. Prudence rushed over to help. Cheyenne resisted playfully. They splashed and screamed until it was time to eat. By this time, Wayne had arrived with his girlfriend Marva, an artist. They all huddled around a table in Mr. Samuel's gazebo. "How much we got?" asked Leroy. He was the official in charge of counting the money they had pooled and outlining their options. They decided that today they were rich enough to order 3 escovitch, snapper fish, and enough festival and bami to share. In about 20 minutes, Mr. Samuels walked proudly from the kitchen with a platter of snapper and a basket containing the fried sweet, cornmeal rolls and cassava cakes, festival and bami, the national dish of Helsha Beach. They shared 3 bottles of soda by pouring some into cups. Cheyenne ate daintily, biting small morsels and chewing way too long. Leroy watched her as she nibbled at the fish and bami. She saw how amused he was and decided to explain. "I hate bami," she said. "It's too gummy and hurts my jawbones, and I don't like fish, too many bones." "Next time, we'll get you some mashed potatoes," teased Prim. "Come on, girl, stop playing with the food." By evening, the beach was a bit less crowded. The fishermen started pushing out to sea. Vendors were still strolling along the beach, selling shrimps, seashells, coconut cakes, and craft. One of the 3 horses was making his rounds along the beach, tugged by a weary fellow who dreamed of being elsewhere. Far out at sea, the waves were breaking gently, and a cool breeze drifted over. Back at home, it dawned on Prudence another night of heat and mosquitoes. She stayed on the veranda for as long as she could. Then the mosquitoes drove her inside, where their friends awaited. It was a ploy. Prudence deduced that in Portmore there were 2 distinct types of mosquitoes: outside mosquitoes and inside mosquitoes. The outside ones hovered over your head in swarms of at least 100, serenading you with sweet songs before diving in for the kill. They were the tyrants who regulated your curfew with the precision of a boarding school matron, driving you from the garden or the veranda. You would shut the doors, seal the windows with mosquito mesh, and retreat inside, only to encounter another breed of mosquitoes, this one even more vicious. The inside mosquitoes worked alone. One single one could torment you for hours. They hid under beds, in corners, behind doors, lurking, preparing for ambush. If you had a powerful fan, no problem. It would blow them to bits or take them off course. But no fan tonight. And too hot and clustered to burn mosquito coils or spray insecticide. She was in for a treat tonight, oh yes. Cheyenne climbed over into the cubicle of the bathtub and placed the candle on the ledge. She undid the humongous plait, and her hair tumbled softly across her naked back. She wanted to wash the seawater from her hair. She squeezed shampoo liberally onto her delicate fingers and lathered her hair, then rinsed so that the suds floated down her back, her breast, her thighs, as she tilted her head backwards into the spray of water. She was naked now, and she examined the bruises that had been hidden under her shorts and t-shirt. She hadn't even shown them to Maud. It was the first time he had beaten her so badly that her skin was bruised. He had always taken care not to damage her skin, at least even when he choked her half to death. She had been shocked by the brutality this time, though she had always known he was a dangerous man. "Look what you made me do, Cheyenne," he had said. "If you obeyed me, this wouldn't have happened. Just do what I say. I don't want to hurt you." She soaped the washcloth and gently cleaned the inside of her thighs. Her buttocks hurt from the wheels made by the leather belt he had used to beat her with. The soap stung the raw wounds. It was then that she cried for the first time since she had run away. Suddenly, There was a shuffle at the door, and Cheyenne looked around. She hadn't pulled the shower curtain because she needed the light from the candle. It was then that she realized that there was a hole in the door where another lock had been removed and someone had pushed out the cardboard that had been wedged into it. A peeping Tom. It was Freddy. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Shy, let's go sit on the bridge with the others, said Prudence. A full week had passed. It was Saturday again. The bridge was a small concrete slab structure that spanned the swale so people could avoid the mud when the drains overflowed during the rainy season. There was a bridge at the end of most pathways. Sometimes in the evening, people sat on the bridge to cool out before the mosquitoes came to claim their territory. 4 or 5 persons congregating along the narrow bridge often made it tedious for others to get past. The more snobbish of the residents would squeeze through with great resentment. Others took to the swale once it was dry enough. Maud didn't like the idea of them sitting along the bridge. People should be able to pass in peace and go about their business, she said. You guys shouldn't block the way like that. We're not blocking the way. We're not blocking the way, said Prudence, though it was very clear that they were. They can pass, they're just miserable. No one was allowed to plant trees or do any gardening in the part of the swale left in front of each house to facilitate drainage. They planted trees and did gardening anyway. It's the only little greenness in the place, Maud explained in defense. The councillor said, as long as you don't plant them so they block the drainage, it's okay. The councillor had told her no such thing. Not in person at least. But there were many things done in Greater Portmore that the municipal council turned a blind eye to. When they combed through the scheme, handing out pamphlets during election time, with their entourage donning either the orange or green shirts of their respective parties, they came face to face with the blatant disobedience of rules. They gave out warnings, but smiled and nodded and issued sweet good mornings. Election time. There were rules, but the residents of Greater Portmore had ironed out their own system of vigilante justice as it applied to matters which they felt were unique to how their community had evolved. For example, on the books, Greater Portmore was a predominantly dormitory community of residential lots. As such, there were to be no commercial enterprise whatsoever conducted within the scheme except in designated commercial blocks. But along the length and breadth of the scheme, you could see signs advertising corner shops, hairdressing parlors, nurseries, bars, garages, dressmaking, restaurants, wholesalers, every manner of enterprise that would be deemed relevant to a community bursting at its seams, all operated from residential units within the scheme. There were just not enough commercial outlets available to stem the great tide of entrepreneurial potential that brimmed the minds of Portmore residents. Once or twice, major attempts were made to clear the streets of vendors. A massive cleanup took place. The municipal council was unrelenting for about a month. Those who sold fruits and ground provisions from vans or hatchbacks had to vacate the area. Those who sold soup or jerked chicken from coal pans along the main road had to follow suit. The sole bicycle repair shop was given notice. Within the walkways, municipal workers went about the daunting task of issuing notices to shops, nurseries, and hairdressing salons. The news of it spread throughout the scheme, and those who were privy to the thumbs up locked their shops, pulled their shutters, and removed their signs until the workers left. Then it was back to business as usual. Some entrepreneurs preferred the more mobile approach. They peddled their wares on foot, bicycle, or cart. You could get anything from fruit, fresh vegetables for your steaming Sunday morning plate of callaloo or pak chow, clothes, brooms, roach and rat bait, fan repairs, and novelties. Add to that the Jehovah's Witnesses, who went around giving out tracts and pamphlets and stopping to spread the gospel. The walkways in Greater Portmore were a beehive of activity, punctuated by little lapses of tranquility. There were always men in uniforms walking about. Some went from house to house, reading electric or water meters. At another time of the month, the contractors went by on an opposite mission, disconnecting the supplies of those who had neglected to pay their bills or clear their arrears. At or near a certain date, people would become edgy as they peeped through the windows to see if the men were headed down the pathway with shovels to uproot the water meter connection or with tools to disconnect the light. With muster determination, the residents would go out to see if their names had been placed on the list and to plead their case. Sometimes they were given a blind, most times they were disconnected without mercy. Other men in uniforms came to install cable service and add to the chaotic tangle of wires and cables that spanned the community. Men came to deliver courier packages. Men on bikes came to deliver pizza. By about 7 p.m., the delivery vans pulled up from the various stores to deliver furniture, and uniformed men could be seen unloading whole living room suites, beds, kitchen sets, refrigerators, television sets, everything that added to the comfort and status of the residents. It seemed that Greater Portmore was the great domain of uniformed men, Prudence thought. And there were other men in less official roles, in vaster numbers. Greater Portmore teemed with laborers and tradesmen who each professed to having every imaginable skill and very rarely lived up to it. There was endless construction going on, 2 decades and running, as the once virgin community of plant quads gradually came into its own and took on shape and character. Each was given a little room out front for expansion. Their creativity went wild. There were trucks constantly delivering marl, sand, gravel, hardware, steel, lumber, and everything needed to lay the foundation and get the houses up on their feet. Then there were the trucks delivering windows, doors, fancy moldings, air conditioning units, awnings, and a myriad of fixtures. The workmen went about taking all kinds of measurements with gadgets that they did not understand and which were usually borrowed. Most of them had only served as apprentices for a short time before arrogance and impatience pushed them to branch out on their own and go promoting themselves as professionals. The blocks didn't line up properly, the walls were lean and cracked, the roofs leaked, the kitchen cabinets lost their veneer as the lacquer came off a little each time the householders cleaned them. The workmen came in the mornings wearing hard hats and water boots and loaded down with toolkits and bags, saws, hammers and set squares, levels, shovels and drills. They were like soldiers marching in an army of reserves, of amateurs, but demanding commensurate pay. They were like termites off to build a massive kingdom, an intricate system of mounds that were as deep and wide as they were high, except that these kingdoms leaked, leaned, and every once in a while collapsed. And these men expressed no remorse, nor humility, nor did their rates fall, quite to the contrary. In the evenings, especially on the weekends, another team of uniformed men could be seen marching down the pathway. These were the footballers, who each nursed dreams of one day representing his country at the World Cup. Hence, the constant practice on the field behind the scheme, even during the rainy season when one or two crocodiles ended up on the field. The residents of Portmore were just as boisterous as anyone else as they cheered their respective teams during any broadcast, from Premier League to World Cup. They were even more raucous cheering on their athletes as the various meets were broadcast throughout the year. Every so often, during particular seasons, the entire scheme would erupt with screams of jubilation and adulation, like a wave of madness sweeping across the community. Then it acted as one organism, alive and rambunctious, patriotic and insane, all at once. Leroy never found himself interested in sports of any kind. He had been out on the field behind the scheme only twice, and both times to paint. He could never come to terms with the insanity of running about for 90 minutes trying to get a ball into a net, or even running down a track in much less time trying to get yourself across a finish line. No sport at all appealed to him. He just couldn't understand what the hoopla was all about. Whenever he heard the fanatical cheers, the pots and pans being clashed, and saw the people jumping and doing a celebratory jig, he rolled his eyes to the sky and shook his head. Insanity. One of the times when he had been on the field searching for a good spot to set up his art equipment, a football had rolled up to him and they were beckoning for him to kick it back to them. He did, more out of a good-natured hospitality than for any guise of sportsmanship. It gave him no thrill. It was the first and only time he had kicked a football. It hurt his toes for days, even though he had been wearing leather boots. Across from the bridge on 98th Way was a bar. It was easy to tell. They made a pretense of trying to keep it secret, but the sharp smell of rum was a dead giveaway. Add to that the shady critters who loitered out front with a glass of liquor in one hand and a cigarette in the other, the blaring music coming from the jukebox, the unmistakable smell of ganja, and the fetid smell of the old men who kept emerging and re-entering. Yup, it was a bar all right. Last week, Inspector Lloyd had swooped down and scraped up 3 youths who had been caught smoking weed. Cheyenne was sitting among the others on the bridge and kept glancing over at the bar. "That's one place you don't want to be, Shy," said Prim. "Don't ever go cross over there, they'll eat you alive." "What's that smell?" Cheyenne asked. "The rum or the weed?" asked Wayne. "Or the piss?" asked Greg. "They smoke weed over there like nothing," Prudence explained. "And sometimes they season it. Like that guy there, they mix lizard tail in his weed and now he's stark raving mad." Prudence pointed to a teenager who had been parading up and down the road, barefooted and in rags. The blend of odors was peculiar on this pathway. The rum, the ganja, the stale urine by the side of the bar, the pile of garbage that kept rising in spite of the sign that said, "Do not dump here." In years gone by, the garbage truck came twice weekly to collect the refuse. Now, they had narrowed it down to 1 day per week, if so many. It would get so bad that maggots would abandon the pile and start crawling away from into the streets, searching for soil to complete the next stage of their metamorphosis. Those persons who lived at the end of the block suffered most from the unsightly pile of junk as well as the malodorous fumes, and the scraps scattered by the dogs in their raids night after night. These neighbors complained bitterly among and against each other. They complained about how insensitive it was to take out the garbage several days before the truck was expected to come. They complained about persons leaving sand and gravel and marl along the road after they had completed their construction. The people who lived at the end of the block complained about everything. They complained about young people clogging up the bridge when they wanted to pass. Prudence stood up on the bridge. The sun was threatening a descent into the west, or promising one, depending on how you looked at it. "You still want to go up to the hill, Lee?" she asked, placing her arms around his neck, then using her fingers to tap a rhythm on the top of his head. She made music out of everything she touched. "Yeah, I was thinking about that," said Leroy. "We still have about 3 hours of strong daylight left. Half an hour to get to the top of the hill. I could still get some painting done." They had been planning to hike to the top of the hill at Brayton. Leroy wanted to do some abstracts using the view of Greater Portmore from 1,000 feet above as an inspiration. Wayne wanted to make some sketches. Prudence wanted to update her list of conquests and add this to the dozens of times that she had subdued the steep incline. Greg wanted to watch Prudence climb the hill in her shorts. "If we head out now, we'll beat the mosquitoes on the way back," Leroy calculated. The hill at Brayton was a favorite climb for joggers and hikers who wanted to lose some weight or just keep fit. It was a very steep hill, particularly treacherous as you broke the corner to face the final ascent. Many people turned that corner and decided against it. The view from the summit was awe-inspiring, an almost panoramic spread of the many small communities that were known collectively as Portmore. A few brave souls, or braggadocious souls, made a point of sprinting up the hill at breakneck speed. This was supposed to be an indication of their stamina and fitness. Others crawled up so sluggishly and laboriously that they made it seem hardly worth the bother. These usually got about halfway and turned back. But most climbed up at a modest, steady pace, patting the sweat from their faces as they went, cheering each other on. They told stories and caught up on the latest news and aired their political persuasions in very heated tongues. Some carried their music to keep them company. Some carried their pit bulls on leashes and made a very unconvincing show of keeping the beast under control, much to the chagrin of the joggers. Some were underdressed, some overdressed, in expensive yoga suits and brand-name sneakers, making a statement as they climbed. It seemed that in all the history of the Brayton Hill, only 6 of the thousands of climbers ever got the notion to climb to the top of the hill to do art. Very avant-garde. Leroy had taken a bag in which there were countless tubes of acrylic paint, several brushes, and 4 sheets of canvas scrolled over each other. The only thing missing was his easel, but he could improvise. He used several tacks to hold 1 sheet of canvas in place on a concrete wall at the very summit of the hill, erected by some government agency or other. Wayne had a huge sketch pad and charcoal pencils. One of the advantages of never using paint, he could travel light. He made 3 sketches of Prudence in various postures of exhilaration of having once again conquered the hill. He made 1 sketch of Prudence and Cheyenne sitting on a mound with their backs turned to him, throwing pebbles down into the gully. He made 1 sketch of Prim looking off into the distance, pretending to be unaware of being sketched. He made 1 sketch of Leroy with brush in hand and brush in left hand and palette in right, a portrait of the artist mixing paint. Wayne only made 1 sketch of the Brayton Hill. Landscape was boring to him, unworthy, Real beauty lay in the faces, bodies, curves, dips and rises of real live people. As usual, Prudence hovered over Leroy's abstracts and poked fun at their lack of semblance. He, in response, pitied her simplicity with a smirk. Leroy had asked Cheyenne to sit on a boulder. He painted a portrait. It turned out as blobs, blotches, smudges, and smears. Only you could make a pretty girl look ugly, Lee, laughed Prudence. End of chapter 5 and end of this video, and we'll continue in the next video. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for staying with us.